Thank you for joining us here today at SRP in this beautiful facility. I'm really excited about the day and turning it over to my colleagues, but I just wanted to give you a quick welcome and thank you for all that you do for Arizona. We wake up every day thinking about how can we bring Arizonans together to create a bright future for our state, and I know all of you are dedicated to that. Part of what motivates us and drives us is, in fact, or everything that drives us really is what matters most to Arizonans and what kind of agenda do we need to create to meet the needs and desires of Arizonans to create a bright future for our state. So the progress meters that you're going to hear about are really central to that because they give us fact-based information about how we're actually doing in Arizona on all the things that matter. So I just really am here to say a quick welcome, a thank you to the Arizona Grantmakers Forum, a thank you to SRP, and to get our day started and turn it over to our wonderful staff. So thank you for having us.
Hello everyone, I'm Kristi Tate. I'm the Director of Civic Health Initiatives for the Center for the Future of Arizona. And as Sybil said, we're just really excited to have the opportunity to be with you all today in this discussion. Huge thanks to Lori and Kim, who have just been great partners and hosts in bringing this together, so we really appreciate it. I'm going to start off with just a little bit of background about the center and this work in Arizona. We want to kind of frame the conversation and give you a sense of what we hope to do in discussion with you all today. For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, I know we have many great collaborators and partners in the room. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that's really focused on this mission of bringing Arizonans together to build a bright future for our state. So big, ambitious mission that we really approach through three strategic areas. One is in sharing trusted information about what matters most to Arizonans, and that will be really the topic of discussion with you all today. The second is really working alongside partners to provide data and tools that can help advance solutions to their priorities. And the third is in thinking about systemic change. So how do we collaborate with partners to really create breakthrough opportunities? And in that area, we have a strong track record of work in education innovation, in career and workforce development, and in civic engagement as well. So it's through those partnerships and through that statewide reach that we've been able to engage and impact really hundreds of thousands of Arizonans, and taking that approach of really being data informed and community driven in advancing those solutions. So I'll just say a word about the Arizona we want before we have a little bit of discussion to kick us off. This vision of the Arizona we want really expresses what we've understood to be the key priorities and aspirations of the people that live here. The center has driven our work, as Sybil said, based around those issues that matter most. We feel that that's the key area of importance to drive discussion and action and center an agenda around what residents of the state really value and care most about. In order to develop that agenda and that vision, we've really occupied the role of kind of listener through a 10-year journey, which some of you I'm sure have been familiar with and explored and engaged with us throughout the years. The kickoff to that process was 10 years ago in partnership with the Gallup organization of launching really the first and only of its kind still statewide poll to talk with Arizonans about what were their key hopes, concerns, aspirations for the future of the state, and to really develop kind of these key areas of focus in the Arizona we want. We've continued then to iterate and re-express that vision through a series of countless meetings across the state, working with leaders like you all to continue to understand and evolve that. And today what we'll do with you in this conversation is really an expression of kind of that living, breathing, evolving process. We launched this community conversation series in the spring as a way to really be out across the state, hearing from communities about what were the issues today that are top of mind, that are most critical to draw our attention to, and to share these new tools called the Arizona Progress Meters that really provide data to frame those conversations, to begin to spark action and dialogue, and then to measure progress on those issues. So before we jump into kind of what we've learned along the way from Arizonans and some of this data, we wanted to hear a little bit from you all. I know everyone's mid-lunch, so apologize for putting you on the spot. But if we could just do a quick introduction among the group, it really helps us to kind of know where folks are coming from. We'd love for you to share who you are, what organization you're with, but if you could share just sort of the single most important issue you view right now as of critical importance to the future success of the state, that would be great. I know that's a tough question because we all operate with the understanding that these are complex, interconnected issues. But if you can share kind of the one thing top of mind today that you think is most critical to our success as a state, that would be great. So if I may, I might start with Kim, our great colleague, to kick us off, and we'll just go round robin across the room.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Kim Garbaz, Arizona Grantmakers Forum. That question is always difficult to answer, and it does depend on the day, I think. But what comes to mind today is wealth inequality being a major issue.
I'm Samara Amin. I'm working with the Thunderbird Charities as an AmeriCorps Public Ally. It's a program that runs under the ASC Wilson Center. And so what's always on my mind is trying to create a just and equitable society.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Ruggiero, and I'm part of the Thunderbird organization. Thunderbird Charities is one of our giving arms. And what bubbles up over and over is, why is so many of our fellow Phoenicians homeless? Is it affordable housing? Is it a job that can pay appropriately? It's just overwhelming to us. I mean,
hi everybody, again, I'm Laurie Lyles with Arizona Grantmakers Forum. My table mates really took a few of the top issues, so since nobody said anything about education, then I'll throw that one out there as well. So I associate myself with their priorities, but throw education on the table also.
As we continue, feel free to echo or ditto if something really spoke to you from another participant. We can move to the next table,
I'm
please.
Andrea Cohen. I'm with the Jewish Community Foundation. And I work with our youth in training them to be grant makers. And because I'm in the youth world, education is absolutely at the forefront of my list.
Yes. Andrea Moreno with SRP, and I have to echo the education piece as well, because it's always something that, at least here at SRP, we're always looking at, ways to build our future workforce, et cetera. So.
Hi, I'm Dakota Smith from the Arizona Community Foundation, and I would have to echo these ladies as well. Education, growing up in Phoenix and seeing what kind of opportunities are available when I was going through high school and what opportunities are available now, that's kind of just something that's always top of mind for me.
I'm Maria Maskell with APS. And I think maybe to throw out something different, for me, I'll just say the fallout from the opioid addiction crisis.
Hi, I'm Molly Wag, also with APS. I would also echo the need for educational reform, especially in the state of Arizona. The fact that we continuously are ranking so low in education is a big issue. I would also say the need for prison reform and criminal justice reform, and that's more of a national issue.
Hi everybody, Brooke Williams with APS. I echo a lot of what's already been said, but I will also throw out the environment and securing a sustainable future.
Chloe will move over to you next.
I'm Chloe Silva. I'm with the Virginia Jew Piper Charitable Trust. There's a lot that's been said that I think I would definitely agree with. I would probably kind of pivot off of what Kim was saying around, but I look at it as kind of creating equity in the global economy.
Hi, Gary Romero at Piper Trust. Probably for me, it's image. I think image of Arizona needs to be changed. It will trickle down to the other things.
Interesting. Hi, I'm Sean Donnelly, Learning and Evaluation for Piper Trust. I think today what's top of mind for me is access to quality, affordable housing.
Hi everyone, Ashley Suarez, also with Piper Trust. I think today it's the climate crisis. I'm Juana Hernandez with SRP, and it is a focus area of mine, so I would say basic needs, but helping people move on from just those initial basic needs and helping them be successful.
Hello, Eliana Gudinho with Valley of the United Way, and it's equitable education.
Cindy Gershon from Valley education opportunities are equal no matter where you live?
Buenos dias, Francisco Avalos with Valley Descent United Way as well. So I'm reading Winners Take All right now, the elite charade of changing the world. And so it's a critique or a look at philanthropy and philanthropists. And so I think really looking at collective impact alignment to address all of the issues that have been addressed here. And for me right now, the primary one is focused on the toxic environment in South Phoenix, the pollution and the increased health outcomes, primarily for people of color and communities. So.
Hi, I'm Dawn Gerundo with Valley and the Sun United Way, and I would echo as my teammates around equitable education. Zip codes shouldn't matter, and they do in our state, so we really need to take a look at that. I'm Erica Castro with SRP, and I would echo everyone that mentioned education, but a spin to that, I would just say not just the formal education, which leads up to the progress meters, but also just education about other issues that are happening in Arizona, whether it's water issue, homelessness issue. I think just education around our community, so that way everybody can better understand what the issues are and what we can do to fix them.
I'm Roxanne Murphy with College Success Arizona, specifically the Arizona College Access Network. So I also echo education and students having equal access to secondary options. Hi, I'm Kimberly Taylor, I'm Valley the Sun United Way, and an issue of poverty for all of our students who have been creating education. Yesterday was the public forum poverty, so I'm very excited to hear about progress made.
Felicia Bass, Arizona Grant Makers Forum, and I have to echo the affordable or housing that's affordable.
I'm Andre Carmichael with the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona in Tucson. I would also echo education, but I also would echo the sustainable environment in the future.
Kristi? I just wanted to jump in again because it was so moving to hear all of you talk about what matters to you. At the Center for the Future of Arizona, I would say we care about all of those things. I did want to add a comment based on what the gentleman here said about this idea of what people think about Arizona, because as my staff will know, oftentimes in these venues, and maybe we're going to do that today, I'm not sure, we ask people, what do you love about Arizona? Because as grant makers and people who are trying to move Arizona forward, you probably understand this, that to actually make change, you have to care about something. So how do we increase our sense of connection to Arizona and our love of our state as a very powerful force in making change? And I would say the second thing that I care about and that we care about is really that sense of agency and participation. So to make change, you need to feel that you can actually make that change. And these community conversations in many ways are really part of that. How do we better understand Arizona? How do we better connect to it? How do we get a sense of agency and the possibility for change? And all of those things, I think, increase pride and sense of connection and love for Arizona. So it's kind of a virtuous circle. So I just kind of wanted to jump in and say, we care about it all. Cynthia, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Sybil. So that actually pivots perfectly into what we're here to do today and what we've been doing across the state. As Sybil shared, this exercise has been, I think, really energizing for all of us that get to be a part of it, to have this discussion not only about kind of the issues that are top of mind, but what it means to us to be Arizonans, what we love about this place, what is kind of our shared identity, and how do we develop that sense of ownership to really make progress on those issues. A huge part of what we'll do today is to really hear from you. We'll share the issues that we have expressed as part of the Arizona We Want, the progress meters and the data we're using to measure those issues. But part of what we're doing in the community conversations is then hearing from you all of what resonates, what might be missing, what key issues do we need to make sure are in that ongoing kind of evolution of understanding what's happening today in Arizona, and what data and tools do we need to continue to make progress on those issues. We'll do that through discussion, and we also have a survey tool that we'll offer at the end of the session that gives just kind of an open-ended space to capture some more of those insights about what you love about this place, what you think makes it unique. All of that input is really valuable as we continue to feed that into kind of this bigger sense of what is the Arizona we want. So just to say a couple more words about what we've been hearing through this journey, it certainly echoes a lot of what you all shared. Through that original project of engaging with Arizonans across the state to identify key issues of concern, we've bubbled those up into 8 key priorities reflected here in the Arizona We Want wheel. You have further descriptive language in your brochure and card that describes how we've interpreted what those issues mean, trying to express and kind of reflect back what success might look like in a more narrative sense. But what we're here today to share is a little bit more about our progress meters, which are new tools to really track and measure how are we doing on those issues as a state, and what does that mean for us? What questions does it raise? What opportunities for further action can emerge from that? The first of these progress meters, and it was front and center in many of your reflections, is the education progress meter, which was launched in 2016 with our great partners at Expect More Arizona. Understand that many of you are not only aware of the progress meter, but really deeply engaged with how that can kind of inform our work and align impact. I think the education progress meter has provided a really great framework for what it means to take a comprehensive long-term view on an issue and then use data to really understand where we are and start to chart a course moving forward. This data is probably not surprising to most of you in the room, but it certainly sparks a lot of this discussion about what are the needs and opportunities in the education system. The fact that just 24% of our kids are receiving high quality early learning, less than half reading at 3rd grade proficiency levels in 8th grade math, which we know are critical indicators of success for the long term. So what this data does is really kind of prompt that discussion. We provide this through our partners at the Decision Center for Educational Excellence down to the local level as well. So you're able to view for county, town, city, what this looks like in your own community. And what it's done for us is provide a model of how this information can really spark action and really drive dialogue across the state. So the education progress meter to date, Evelyn, our key champion on our team with Expect More of this work, just shared we're actually up to close to 50 cities and towns who have now formally adopted the education progress meter as a framework for their own communities. Statewide leaders like the governor's office, the Department of Education have formally adopted this meter. And it's also prompted some really interesting action at the community level. So those of you familiar with the Achieve 60 work in Pinal County, there's a mobilization of kind of regional leaders who saw that data for their community and see the 60% goal of attainment for the state and are really focused on how do we close the gap locally, how do we lead to that statewide goal, and that's happening in regions across the state. We've had cities launch early childhood education programs subsidized for low-income family members, seeing that data about access to early childhood care, which has great outcomes for the kids, but they've also seen then the parents going back to work, continuing their education, and seeing kind of the spillover effects into all of those issues in that wheel of the Arizona We Want. So this education progress meter that you all have been key drivers of and kind of owners of as partners is really kind of paved the way for what it means to have data prompt that kind of discussion and action. And it's the first of what we've now launched across those issues of the Arizona We Want. So what we have done as a center for the past couple of years then for each of those other issue areas, jobs, infrastructure, health and well-being, natural resources, and civic health and civic engagement, is to say, what would be the metrics of success on this issue? How would we know if we're moving the needle, if we're moving forward, and really realizing the Arizona We Want in that issue? And as you can imagine, through a really extensive process of stakeholder engagement, you hear a lot of different reactions, a lot of indicators, a lot of ideas kind of bubble up to the surface. So we had 3 key criteria to then narrow those into sharper focus for each issue. Those were that the information had to be easily understood. So we needed metrics that could be widely shared, widely understood. They needed to have trusted, regularly reported data. So we had to have a data source that was publicly available, that would be updated on a regular basis, which has proven to be one of the interesting parts of this endeavor. There's a lot of things that we want to know and measure, but we don't yet have great data to do that. So that prompts another question in and of itself. And they also had to be useful to inform policy and practice. So that criteria helped develop ultimately what became kind of the set of progress meters that we'll share today. They're all available on our website, so you can kind of browse through all of them. My colleague Ian will give you a snapshot of what we're learning and seeing through that data in the progress meters. And I'll say one last word on one of the areas that's still in development, which is this young talent issue. So we took a very different approach to the issue of young talent. So that emerged through the Arizona We Want as residents of the state saying, we need to pay attention to how we're developing and attracting and retaining young talent for our communities. So we stepped back and said, well, we should talk to young people across the state and hear what's on their minds, what's their story in Arizona, what would allow them to thrive and stay here, what might cause them to leave. And we've been gathering that input and we'll be sharing out some of those stories in November and then completing a survey process to actually hear really rigorously statewide from young people to say, what are the meters that we need to track for this young talent issue as a state to know if we're making progress and if we're making Arizona sort of the place to be for young people. So that's the last one that's currently in development. The others you'll be able to access and see on our website today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ian, who will give you a little bit of the data lightning round.
The lightning round. We have a question?
Ian, this may be too early for a question, but I'm gonna ask it and then
Sure.
you'll cover it.
Great.
I was just curious to know on the progress meters, all those are student focused, and I was wondering if there's anything that's looking at the bigger overall issue of like the state of education in terms of like teacher retainment and recruitment and kind of some of the bigger education issues. I don't know if that was addressed or if you'll talk about it, but I was curious.
That's a great question. And I think you'll find in all of the metrics that we have is what we can do is we can capture an element or two that's a really good indicator of certain factors within the overall topic, but it's really hard to capture the whole thing without having thousands of metrics. And trust me, I have plenty to do. So it is a little bit of a trick, but that's a really great suggestion. And we're taking these suggestions and we're thinking about how we can improve our metrics over time. And certainly we understand that education is much more than the 8 metrics that we have on the screen. But these are important metrics, and they were chosen by trusted sort of leaders within that arena, just like all of our other metrics. But that's really good input, and we'll take that and we'll consider it.
Can I add something to that, Ian?
Yeah, sure.
Just
Go
on
ahead,
the,
Kristi.
On the young talent issue that I mentioned, something that we'll be sharing out broadly with all of you. Thank you.
And asking you to share with others is a survey that allows further input on the young talent progress meter, and the overall kind of big picture quality of the education system is something that's emerging regularly in those focus groups. So the systemic issues, whether it's education funding, perceived quality, what are the kind of measures that could be used in that area, but that is coming up repeatedly through that kind of listening stream, so we'll have opportunities for survey input on that too, and would welcome your thoughts on that.
So great. So I will launch into the data presentation. And what I tend to do is overcome the innate boringness of data with exuberance and joy. So if I have that today, and hopefully it's energizing and you can suffer with me. All right, so we have progress meters in 7 of the 8 categories on the screen. And the one that Kristi talked about is our young talent, which we're working on now, and we'll have exciting updates on that in the next few months. And I'm going to share just a little bit of data from each one of them to really just kind of tickle your fancy, and maybe in the next couple of days our webmaster will report all of the amazing hits we're having to our website of folks who are looking at the metrics and exploring them. So the goal here is not to give you the full picture of each metric, but rather to help you understand the types of information that are available in the progress meter metrics. All right, so if we look at our jobs data, this is the first slide that tends to get busy immediately, and a few people's eyes glaze over and they may or may not go find a cookie. But you can see here that we have data for job growth in Arizona and in our 7 municipal statistical areas, and comparing that to the US as a whole. So I was told not to touch the screen because really interesting things may happen. So I'm just going to point. In the US, we had 2% job growth from August to August, from 2018 to 2019, which was really nice for the United States. Arizona as a whole, we had 2.5% job growth. That was pretty neat. We've actually been leading the US as a whole. If you look at these charts, comparing the US, which is in the far left in 2010, to the far right, which is 2019, Arizona has led for the most of the last 5 years, led the US in job growth. If we look at our cities, our municipal statistical areas, which are actually much bigger than cities, The Phoenix Mesa MSA is actually, 2/3 of the state's economic development or more. You get a sense for how each area of Arizona is doing in the data. So if we look, for example, at Flagstaff, they had negative job growth August to August coming into 2019. But most of our cities are doing quite well, actually. Phoenix is right here. Phoenix has had really good job growth, about 2.7%. And you can see it's kind of broadly distributed. The one thing I'll point out before I get to a question here in the front is that Sierra Vista Douglas has been the most challenged of our MSAs over the last few years. And we see this as we work in those communities. We see a lot of emphasis on job growth and job creation as one of their priorities. Lori?
I may have said this, but could
Sure.
you remind us again what an MSA is?
Sure, municipal statistical area. It's one of those fun US Census Bureau things where they try to aggregate lots and lots of cities into one big clump, assuming, which is true, that geographic regions tend to be a better picture of economic development than individual cities within those geographic regions. Yeah, so can I move on to the next slide? Sorry, I might have seen a hand. No? Okay, great. So there you go. This is our job growth data. This is one of 5 metrics in our jobs progress meter, and something that we are excited to share. And this is the most fun because we get to update this every month, which is great.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
And you say job growth, but are we growing the jobs in a job that has affordable wage? Is that?
Yeah, great question. This is literally the number of employees within that city or that region as compared to the next year's number of employees. Does not measure wages or anything else, but we do measure average wages in our progress meters. And so you can see that Arizona is about 10% lower than the national average wage. So you can see that we have some room to grow in that area. All right, let's talk a little bit about education. Kristi hit on a couple of these and she showed some of these data earlier, but it's still worth talking about. And that is, one thing is only about 1 in 4 Arizona children are in a quality early learning setting, which means they're getting education that meets certain standards as a part of their sort of daycare regimen. So this is a challenge for us as a state, is to make sure that there are adequate amounts of affordable quality early learning opportunities for our children. And we know that that translates into educational sort of achievement early on in their educational life. So one thing we'll see is those children who are in quality early learning will do better on their grade 3 reading proficiency test, the AZ Merit. We have right here our 2018 AZ Merit data that shows that about, less than half all across the state of our grade 3 students are at grade level, which presents a challenge. One thing that we can do with our progress meters, which is interesting, is we can look across the counties of Arizona to try to get a sense for what communities are doing better or worse, as an opportunity for those communities to prioritize that issue. So, for example, we see that Gila and Apache County have significant challenges in this area. This might be something that Gila and Apache County, when they understand this, they can work toward addressing it. Where Maricopa County does somewhat better, as we can see. Arizona as a whole, by the way, is on the far right, 44%, yes.
Because I have a high school senior and one who's in college now, and I know how seriously they took AZ Merit and their high school in a nice zip code took AZ Merit. How do we put stock in these numbers if the teachers aren't really encouraging kids and there's questions about the test itself? Like, do we have other measures that you're measuring against, or is it straight up AZ Merit?
Well, this is the most broadly applied assessment tool that we have available for statewide. We know that AZ Merit's applied statewide, so it is the best available tool for us to measure grade 3 proficiency. Excuse me. It's not to say that it's the only way or that it's the best way. And we know that different schools do prioritize tests in different ways. And we know that standardized testing isn't necessarily the best way to measure student achievement. All of those things are true. So as with any of our progress meter metrics, there are limitations to the data being perhaps the perfect data. Great question. We talk about our 4-year high school graduation rate. We have one county in Arizona that is at the Arizona Progress Meter goal, which is 90% graduation rate. And that's our friends in Graham County, which is cool. Greenlee is a little bit lower, Santa Cruz County is a little bit lower, but you can see that high school graduation is something that we are getting closer to meeting the goals in certain communities. We have more challenges in more rural communities, communities that have higher percentage of Native American populations we have more challenges in, but we're doing pretty well in terms of getting folks through high school. Some of our data, which I don't have here, is about going to college. That's another story, and certainly attaining or finishing college is a whole nother story, which I won't get into today. But yes?
Do we know anything about what they're doing right in Graham County? Because it doesn't get any more rural than that.
It doesn't get more rural. Well, Graham County has some unique characteristics that make it do well in this area. In particular, it has kind of very few population centers and one major industry, that helps it. So that does present opportunity for Graham County. But that's a great question. We might want to go to Graham County and say, what are you guys doing? Because you're doing a great job. Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. So I am actually an urban planner, so I work in a lot of these arenas, including infrastructure. So I'm going to do my best to explain this one to you, because it's a really interesting data point, but it looks a little bit confusing when you look at it. So we're looking here at the travel time index, is what it's called. It's a national statistic. And what it does is it compares cities for how long it takes to get from point A to point B during rush hour to how long it takes to get from point A to point B when we all love to drive, which is 3 in the morning. So the difference between those two times it creates a ratio. And what that basically tells you is how well is the city preparing its highways and its transit to respond to peak conditions, which is what we all care about, because all of us mostly aren't driving at 3 in the morning to work, right? So what this tells us is that some Arizona cities are doing a little bit better than others when compared to their peers. So if we look here at the two blue blocks, which is Tucson compared to other medium-sized cities across the US, you can see it takes 22% longer to get to work if you go in rush hour than if you go at 3 a.m. Other cities take 18% longer. So Tucson lags its peers in that sense. We can't really compare Tucson to Phoenix because they're different sizes and they have different complexities, but we can compare Phoenix to other cities that are in the very large urban area category, and we do slightly better than our peers. It takes 27% longer in Phoenix to get to work than at 3 in the morning, and our peers in other cities of our similar size take 32% longer. So you can see that we're doing a decent job, at least compared to folks that are similarly sized, at getting folks to work. The other metric we have in here, which is interesting, is the time commuting to work statistic that the US Census Bureau collects. We've been about the same in Phoenix for 10 straight years. It hasn't changed, it's been about the same. So that may not be your lived experience, but that's what the data tends to show. All right, let's talk.
You have a question?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Is it only considering people who drive, or is it also considering people who take like public transportation or bike and stuff?
Yeah, so time commuting to work includes public transportation, bicycle, and vehicle. It's basically a survey that goes to everyone. But the peak commute time number is based mostly on vehicle travel, personal vehicle. Yeah, great question. Let's talk a little bit about health. So this is data that we collect. We have lots of data in our health and well-being category on our website. One of them that we look at is Arizonans without access to primary care physician. This could be a number of professions. It could be a personal doctor, it could be a medical physician's assistant, it could be a number of folks who provide primary care. But when we ask folks through a survey that goes out every year from the Center for Disease Control, we can see that the number of folks who have a primary care physician does change over time. One thing that you'll find interesting if we compare 2013, which is on the left, the darker blue, with 2017, which is on the right, the lighter blue, you'll see that more folks do not have access, or excuse me, more folks have access than before. So you can see that now If you have less than a high school diploma, 40% do not have a personal care physician, where previously it was closer to 48%. So more folks do have that access now, partly due to the expanding Arizona's access program over the last few years. And you can see the variation in income, variation in educational attainment, certain things that are interesting. If you compare us though to the national average on the left, you'll see that we still have room to improve in this area, certainly. Okay, one of my personal favorites. This is the amount of open space per person in Arizona. I've worked for years in the conservation community for all across the state, and this is a metric of personal passion for me, so I'll try not to show it too much. If we look at Arizona as a whole and comparing the number of acres per person in 1990 to 2017, we have about half as many acres of open space as we had in 1990. Now, the first thing you might say is, boy, what did we do with all that land? The reality is it's that we've doubled in population, right? So this presents challenges for us because we have a lot more people who need that land for recreation, who use that land for all sorts of great things, and we have to find a way of balancing those competing needs and make sure that we can still have that great sort of natural environment that everyone loves. And that's the thing that we try to measure with this metric. So if we look across the state at all of our counties from left to right, we see Apache County, they have the least change because they had the least growth. And we look at the far right, our friends in Pinal County have had so much growth and obviously so much more demands on the open space that's available. So this is an interesting one for us. And the thing that we think is an important takeaway for this is that it creates all sorts of opportunity for cities to invest in their outdoor recreation. We've seen that all over the place. Scottsdale with the McDowell Mountain Sonoran Preserve, the city of Buckeye put together their own large preserve as well. City of Peoria has a great reservation program that they work on. Pima County has a great program. So this is a great opportunity to have leadership from our cities.
Ian?
Yeah.
Is there a goal, is there an optimal metric that we should strive for? Or
Yeah,
is it
great
in the eye of
question.
the beholder?
Yeah, great question. You know, one of the things that we were able to do with education is establish a goal for those metrics, and you'll see that on our website. We haven't been able to do that yet for the other metrics, not to say that we can't, but it's a whole different type of process to do that. So right now what we do is present the information and we allow local communities to sort of set their own goals as far as what they want to achieve. With respect to open space, there are national goals around numbers of acres and facilities for, say, ballparks, for playgrounds, things like that. Not so much though for big open kind of desert places, which is one of the things we try to capture in our metric.
Can I
So
jump in?
it is interesting. Sybil, sure.
I think Ian explained it really well, but I just did want to kind of expand on it a little bit. The Center for the Future of Arizona doesn't set goals. We listen to what Arizonans say they want. So the goals that were set in the Education Progress Meter probably took at least a couple of years of bringing educational entities, community leaders, and others together. Because who are we at the Center for the Future of Arizona to set the goals for the state? We do listen very carefully through the processes that my colleagues mentioned, but it's really important to us that we are reflecting back to the communities and to the state what they have said matters to them. So as Ian said, we would love to go through the process of setting goals for these other progress meters, but we don't just pull them out of a hat and say, oh, that sounds really nice, because we think that sounds great. So it is a very involved process, one that's really engaging of communities and leaders. And so it's something that's important, I think, over time, Lori, to do. And as I said, we went through that process with education, and I think we may be able to and are committed to doing the same with these others. But I just wanted to explain that a little bit.
Very great. Thank you so much. Great. All right, let's talk about water. So I was glad to hear a few folks in the room are very concerned about our long-term water supplies. We've actually had, in the last month or so, a couple of really interesting reports about our water situation in the state. And we do measure a few metrics in water that are really important. One of them, for example, is the likelihood of water shortage on the Colorado River Basin. Another one that we measure is our water system loss. How much water do we lose? And I'd like to tell a little bit of story to put this into context. Some of you have probably heard of the Drought Contingency Plan, DCP. That was a huge multi-state agreement that was worked out earlier this year. Actually, Arizona was the last to sign it. Well, that process was very long and difficult with many, many stakeholders. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we chose to reduce our amount of water that we take in Arizona by 192,000 acre feet. What's interesting about that is at the same time, we lost about that same amount of water through leaky pipes in our active management areas. We lost 155,000 acre feet in 2017 from those water systems in Phoenix, in Tucson, Prescott, Santa Cruz area, and I'm missing one. Pinal, thank you, Pinal County, from leaky pipes or water system losses. So it's an interesting thing because there's opportunity for us to do more conservation and more efficiency, and that's some of the data that we share. We'll be excited to get the new data in a few months on 2018's numbers. All right, let's talk a little bit about civic health. We have metrics in something we call civic participation and in connected communities. Civic participation is really about how we engage with governments and in the civics process in our communities. And connected communities is about how we connect with each other and work together in our neighborhoods and in our communities. Some interesting data in civic participation are our Arizona midterm election turnout was really great in 2018. So we did so much better than in 2014 by about 20 percentage points, which was pretty great. So we had really nice turnout in 2018. One of the challenges that we continue to deal with though in Arizona is many people don't feel their vote matters. And when we poll folks, actually the US Census Bureau polls people and ask them, why didn't you vote? 1 in 5 of the people who did not vote say it's because I didn't think my vote mattered. And that's much higher than the national average, which is about 15%. So we have to do a better job of making sure folks realize that their vote really matters. And that's something that we can do together. And then in connected communities, we have a couple of metrics. We actually have 6, I think, or maybe 8 in this category. Providing help to family or friends. Arizona does more in this sense. We provide about 9% of us provide help to our family and friends on a regular basis. Financial, food, things like that, which is better than the national average. And in spending time with neighbors, though, we tend to not do so well. We have the lowest rate in this in the nation, actually. So what I try to do is I take this to heart. I just moved into a new community, and I have made a point of meeting all of my neighbors and making sure they know who I am and making sure they know that I might sing really loud late at night. It's okay. I'm just practicing, things like that. So we can all do better in this area. And the one thing that I'll just touch on that has to do with the Young Talent Progress Meter that Kristi talked about, and that is one of the reasons this is so important is we lose a lot of our talent in our state. This is data from the Arizona Board of Regents, and it shows that immediately upon graduating from one of our universities, about 4 in 5 students stay right here in Arizona and start their career, which is great. The challenge is, as time goes on, many of them choose to leave our state. So I graduated from ASU in 2004. Only half of the people in my cohort remain in Arizona working because they have chosen to go somewhere else. So that's an important thing to know and something that we're working on, and we hope that our Young Talent Progress Meter will help shed light on that issue. All right, well that is all of the data. Nobody fell asleep, so that's really good news. Any final questions before I hand it back over to Kristi? A couple, yes sir.
Do you mind talking a little bit about why the social connectedness piece is so important? Like, why is it important that folks know their neighbors? Is that
So thank you for that question. So I lead our civic engagement work, broadly defined as civic health, and it's my passion. I've worked in civic engagement programs in a lot of settings, but I moved to Arizona and was in DC for many years with a group called the National Conference on Citizenship that developed this tool to measure civic health across the country. So that informs the data we use in Arizona. part of why that project was launched was because there was an understanding that we had really good data on some of the formal ways of engagement, like voter participation or volunteerism, or even charitable giving, but we weren't really capturing or studying whether or not people were involved in kind of the basic building blocks of connectivity at the neighborhood level, building social capital. So what that research has allowed in collecting that over a few years through the census is to start to look at those links with other community outcomes. So one of my favorite studies looked at the link between those measures and economic resilience during the recession, and found that it was actually those connectivity pieces, do you know your neighbors, trust each other, talk to each other, that had the greatest impact in terms of resilience during the recession. So communities that were otherwise similar, economically, socially, demographically, if they had high social cohesion, sometimes there's a difference of like 4 percentage points in unemployment lower than other communities. So there's been kind of this growing body of research starting to look at what is that social resilience, kind of the networks, the buffer that provides, whether it's an economic crisis, a disaster in terms of disaster recovery, and what's the fabric that it creates that then spills over into education, broader health and well-being, economy. So that's one of the things I'm most passionate about, and that we're using this data to help explore, and that it provides an opportunity for other researchers to dig in and say some of these things that are seen as kind of maybe nice to have, or, well, great if you have neighbor connections or a sense of community, but that actually are kind of foundational to our success in a lot of different ways. So, thank you. Yes. Yes.
So does the mobility rate play a factor with that?
Yes, you mean transients of our population? Absolutely. So a statistic that we use pretty regularly at the center is our population as a state is made up of about 2/3 of people coming from elsewhere. And that's been true from statehood to 1950s to today, that kind of transient population. And I think some of the ways you can interpret that is as a challenge of mobility transients, whether or not people have that sense of ownership that Sybil was describing, a sense of shared identity and commitment to making this their place that they want to contribute to. But I think we also view it in the spirit of the Arizona we want as an opportunity. If you have folks kind of coming here and sort of co-creating what is this place that we all decide together, what is our shared identity and kind of shared vision, I think it's created space for us to help develop that, you know, in concert with other partners and folks that live here. So it provides kind of a unique opportunity that doesn't necessarily exist in other places. But I think in that neighborhood engagement, you do see some of that, the transients, mobility issues, some of our built environment, which Ian is also really passionate about. How does our built environment, sprawl, kind of commute system contribute to social capital or some of those challenges? Climate has also come up as a potential, you know, driver within that. So I think there are a lot of factors involved.
Are there any statistics that talk about why those of us who left Arizona and came back, why they came back, and to capitalize on those reasons?
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know of any survey that asks folks who've come back why they've come back. It would be really interesting to know.
Because you can capitalize.
Yeah, sure.
There's those issues that brought them back.
And if we have 2/3 of Arizonans from somewhere else, even asking them, why did you come here to begin with? And if you left, why are you back? That would be interesting. We might explore that, because that's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
The transience issue and coming from somewhere else, in the religious community, in the local Jewish community, one of the problems we're having is that there isn't a loyalty, and people are from somewhere else and they're so quick to move as soon as they have a disagreement with someone else. And so it's really interesting to know that there's a lot of that within the state, and it's not just us.
Right. Yeah, it's good to know it's when it's not just us. Yeah, great point. Anything else? I know we have the ladies have an in-depth conversation to pursue, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and start with that. So thank you all for your patience on the data, and I'll let Kristi